you for tuning into the Becker's Healthcare podcast series. I am Brian Zimmerman, Senior Director of Client Content Strategy with Becker's Hospital Review. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Leah Silver, Director of Business Solutions at Zelis. We're excited to kick off the first episode of a three-part series on the payer-provider experience. Leah is a healthcare payment subject matter expert with over 7 years of cross-functional payment experience. She has held key roles in implementation and account management and has helped independent TPAs, regional health plans, Fortune 500 healthcare payers, both in medical and dental industries, optimize their payment processes. In addition to helping payer clients directly, Leah helps drive strategy and innovation and initiatives for Zelis. Leah, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's get going. To start here, can you describe the typical provider payment experience as it stands today? How has this experience changed in recent years?
Yeah. Today, I think that providers are looking for innovation. Traditionally, the healthcare system as it relates to payments has been a bit antiquated, right? So payers are traditionally paying through one or two modalities, being a traditional ACH method and or paper check method. 90% of providers are being paid through checks today, regardless of whether or not they're still receiving ACH methods from payers through contracted means. But for some odd reason, there seems to be a high means of check paper-based payments being issued out to those providers today. And that's causing a lot of burdens, a lot of administrative processes, and a lot of manual-based work that those providers are ultimately having to undergo in order to process and receive payments internally. And that's causing a lot of abrasion, a lot of work, and it's taken away from the more important task that those providers ultimately have to focus on, which is patient care. And the goal at the end of the day is to ensure that we're, as an industry, allowing providers to focus on the task at hand, which is patient care, making sure that they're providing the utmost care, and we're providing more efficiencies as it relates to solving for the administrative burdens and making sure that we're automating their processes as much as humanly possible through facilitating payments from health insurance payers to the providers and the facilitators that interact in between and facilitate those payments to the providers in the interim. Traditionally, I would say 90% of providers, again, are receiving paper-based payments. 50% of healthcare payers are actually producing payments through an in-house ACH payment process. But I would say those payments are traditionally going out to roughly, those high volume contracted in-network providers, leaving oftentimes some of those smaller, I'll call them mom and pop shops, lower frequency, lower dollar volume providers to default to check, ultimately leaving them to look for alternative solutions to be able to receive their payments outside of a paper check-based solution. Those providers are not looking to provide their bank account information to payers that are paying them. They would traditionally are having 27 payers paying them on average. Think about that. That's 27 different payers that they would have to go out to portals to support enrollment information, to provide their bank account information, to support customer service information, to have their ERAs or their EOBs downloaded directly from. It becomes a real task in order for those individual facilities or practices to be able to manage their payment processes. So they would defer to check in order to receive their payments. So traditionally, they are looking for more advanced solutions that act as an aggregation that provides like a single source hub in order to produce, a seamless experience for them to receive their payments in a multimodal environment that would allow them to choose the best option that would allow for more efficiencies from a receivable standpoint that would allow them to pick and choose the best way in which they receive their payments and streamlines their experience from a customer service standpoint and allow them to have self-service tools that ultimately would, again, speed up their receivables process and allow them to be more in control of their payment processes and be hands-on in that process and allow them to auto-post and take away a lot of those burdens that come along with paper-based payment processing. So I hope that answered your question.
It absolutely does. You sort of laid it out there succinctly, but it's also comprehensive as to sort of,
Yes.
why the typical payment experience is the way it is. But as you mentioned, providers want innovation and they need to be able to focus on patient care. And the
Absolutely.
defaulting to paper doesn't seem like the best way to achieve that. So I guess the question I want to ask is, what's driving the sharp increase in electronic provider payments now? Why has offering this digital experience become so important in healthcare today?
So digitizing payments has increased because of, the innovation that providers are looking for, right? So, I oftentimes talk about the fact that, you have, more providers are coming into the fold that are younger, right? They are more apt to technology and they're looking for more streamlined technology that are going to make their lives easier, right? So when you think about, maybe some of the older population may be, retiring off and maybe they're passing along their practices to their children, right? So those individuals are looking for more innovation and they want to have technology at the forefront and they're looking for ways in which they can take advantage of technology to help streamline their processes. And so they're looking for ways in which they can have automation and they can be hands off in the process, take advantage of tools that would provide for advancements that would allow for them to be more focused on the things that matter the most to them in their practice. And so the sharp increase in electronic payments and the aggregation and the solutions that come to the forefront from some of the vendors in the marketplace today allow for that seamless technology and that connectivity that ultimately provides for some of that targeted niche that allows for those individuals to take advantage of those solutions. So it's not a traditional bank to bank relationship that just directly deposits the monies into the account. It's some of the bells and whistles that come along with the delivery of the data, the delivery of the payment, and a lot of the technology that supports that in the customer service. So that's why we're seeing a sharp increase in the electronic payment delivery as opposed to the checks on the provider side.
Yeah, it makes total sense too when you talk about it from a generational standpoint too. The younger folks coming into these provider organizations are also comfortable with this kind of technology in virtually every other aspect of their lives, right?
Absolutely.
And then, so I want to shift here and think about what this means for payers. So, how has this change, this rise in electronic provider payments, benefited and/or challenged payers here?
So I think it's benefited and challenged them. I'll start with the challenge first before we talk about the good stuff, right? So from a challenge perspective, I think that payers traditionally think about payments and two components, right? It's just that traditional bank ACH and then the check option. I say 50% of plans, they have an in-house ACH offering, or they partner with a vendor that supports them in providing that traditional solution, right? That bank traditional direct deposit offering, or the paper-based check solution. And they've hit a plateau as it relates to their electronic adoption because they're solely focused on that select tier of providers, and that in-network contractor providers, higher volume providers are willing to enroll into that solution because they benefit from it from a volume perspective. And it leaves off the providers that we are less likely or less volume, less frequent to receive payments for those providers. So they traditionally get left out of the mix. They're not thought about when it comes to electronic payments, and that can negatively impact the payers, right? So when you think about NPS scores and perception as it relates to those smaller providers or those smaller mom and pop shops, they can feel left out of the mix, have negative perceptions of those larger payers, right? So that doesn't necessarily provide for great perception as it relates to the healthcare payers. As it relates to the positive impact, I think that when payers start to think about the innovation and transitioning into partnering with solutions that can provide additive value, there's net value that can be gained from partnering with a solution that provides that additive value, right? So you get an increase in provider satisfaction because you're bringing more value to those providers by adding in a solution that provides, a multimodal offering, right? So you have more value to providers that ultimately allows them to pick and choose what options best meet their needs from an electronic payment delivery perspective. You ultimately provide more value to your membership, right? Because providers are ultimately going to have better timing as it relates to how they'll receive their payments, frequency in payments. Providers will receive their payments faster versus a paper check-based payment. And then that will increase member satisfaction because there's less balanced billing. So if checks get lost in the mail, the provider doesn't have to call into the plan and they'll track down payment. There's less of a risk for them to balance bill the member. So there's member and provider satisfaction that gets gained from adding in a secondary tier for electronic payment modality to go out to those, I'll call them secondary, less frequent providers. So there's net benefit to be gained from that perspective for the payers as well.
Yeah, I think you laid out the challenges and the benefits in a pretty measured way. But hearing it all, it does seem like the challenge is kind of worth it, right? The potential benefits are significant.
Absolutely. And there's also that cost reduction, right? So there's always going to be a cost associated with paper. And,
right.
As the industry starts to shift and, there's technology that's going to be out there for the industry to take advantage of to drive toward 100% electronic adoption. The goal is ultimately to drive down the cost associated with print. And our goal is to just ensure that as an industry, we're reducing that cost as much as we possibly can. And we're taking advantage of the tech and the innovation that exists to drive down those costs, not only for the payer, but for the member and the provider as well.
Excellent. Well, Leah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all these insights with our listeners. Is there anything about this topic we didn't get to that you think it's really important for folks out there to understand?
No, I think this is a great conversation. I would just say, let's just always continue to think about the advancements in technology and how we as an industry can take advantage of it and ensure that we're reducing the cost for our healthcare constituents and we're being good stewards of our business and our industry. So I appreciate the time today.
Yes, thank you so much, Leah.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank Zealous for sponsoring this episode. Tune in next month for episode 2 of this 3-part series. You can also tune into more podcasts from Becker's Healthcare by visiting our podcast page.